X-Men Days of Future Past, released in 2014, starring Hugh Jackman, James McAvoy, Michael Fassbender, Jennifer Lawrence, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Nicholas Hoult, Peter Dinklage, Anna Paquin, Ellen Page, and Halle Berry. What a cast. I first saw the film when it was released, and I liked it very much. Now I have decided to give it a rewatch, partly because I thought I'd maybe have a slightly different perspective. At the time, I was not a huge comic book reader. I enjoyed the movies, but wasn't that familiar with, with the source material, and so wasn't that familiar with some of the characters by extension. Whereas now I caught up. I know them all through and through, and so maybe I'd get more out of it. And secondly, because I wanted to see what's known as the Rogue Cut. It's an alternative cut to the theatrical version, containing 17 minutes of additional footage that was previously cut from the film for time. The name Rogue Cut comes from the fact that most of the additional scenes focus on the character of Rogue, who in this version not only actually appears in the film, but plays a significant role in the events of the third act. So, in terms of what the film itself is, it's part of the long-running X-Men series and was perhaps the most important one of them all, because the series began with the older characters for the first three movies, and then for all the next ones decided to sort of do a soft reboot slash prequel series, go back in time and show the same characters played by younger actors. Days of Future Past stands as a bridge between the two. The story begins in the future with the old cast returning one last time. And in this future, it's a bleak, dark, sad future for the mutants. They're being hunted by evil machines called the Sentinels. And it's just a matter of time before the remaining survivors are all lost as well. So they come up with this plan. They all gather together in a defensible fortress in China. And Logan's mind, that's Wolverine, played by Hugh Jackman, gets sent into the past, into his own younger body with a mission. And as he's doing that, they of course have to protect him from the incoming Sentinels. He has to find Charles Xavier and Magneto back in 1973, and together with them try to find Mystique and prevent her from assassinating a scientist named Bolivar Trask, because in the current timeline that assassination happened and it kickstarted the whole program of mutant hunters. And so if they can change that one event, perhaps the whole Sentinel thing never happens. They're never born, and so the future is changed. So in some ways, it's kind of like Avengers Endgame before there was an Avengers Endgame. So how does it hold up now, 6 years after its original premiere? I'd say pretty damn good. This story, which may seem convoluted from the description, is actually well narrated and easy to follow, and it's pretty logical and smart at the same time. What's more, the Rogue Cut actually improves the narrative, especially of the future events. It gives some characters more to do and explains why some events happened the way they did happen. It's well acted, with McAvoy and Fassbender once again being my two favorites. I think throughout the entire series they have been the shining points, and they're excellent both on their own and together, playing out the dynamic between those two characters. In truth, I think the entire cast gives good performances, with the exception of maybe Jennifer Lawrence, who at this point already looked bored with the role and just lacks any energy or charisma in the film. Fortunately, there's a lot of other stuff to make up for her shortcomings. The action is fantastic, so are the special effects, which haven't aged a day and still look bloody spectacular. There are two sequences in the film which are among the most memorable in the history of superhero movies. The fight against Sentinels right at the beginning of the film, with so many of the mutants just dying brutal, gruesome deaths. I mean, the film, unlike many of its peers, doesn't really pull any punches. It's not afraid to murder its characters and do it in a graphic way. And the second memorable scene is, of course, the Quicksilver scene, breaking Magneto out of prison, where the speedster runs around the frozen in time room messing around with stuff to the sound of Time in a Bottle. I've read that the scene was mostly shot using practical effects and took 3 weeks to accomplish. Just one scene, 3 weeks. But the result is just groundbreaking. I mean, I'll put a link in the description if you haven't seen it, because even out of context, outside of the film, it's spectacular. And so, at the end of the day, I did end up enjoying the film more than I remembered previously. But the more I think of it, the more I believe it's not necessarily because of me being a bigger comic book fan now, but being more of a film fan. I think now, knowing much more about cinema than I did then, I was able to look at the film not just as a fun ride, but as a complete film, consider the cinematography and the narrative structure and editing and so on. And I find it to be very, very good. So It's definitely worth a revisit if you haven't seen it in a long time. For new viewers, I would still recommend watching, ideally, all the previous films first, at least First Class, to give you sort of context, know what's going on, who those characters are. And when you finally get to Days of Future Past, it will be a treat, because it is a very competent superhero film. And also do watch The Rogue Cat if you can, because it is the better of the two.